I'm just gonna... Let me just... Hello. Hello, Psychonauts. Today we're going to talk about time, and this is going to be a psychedelic analysis of time. So let's get started, okay? I want to tell you that I'm going to be a bit casual talking about this because it's the best way that I can get my thoughts out. Let's just talk, okay? Okay, so I want to start by talking about time dilation. And first, time dilation is a real thing in physics, a result of relativity, and this is real, okay? This is a real thing, and I like to think of special relativity because special relativity is the easy one, and that deals with the speed of light. So since the speed of light is constant, the implications of this are that when you travel close to the speed of light, time slows down. There's an effect called time dilation. You can calculate it. There's something called a Lorentz transformation. But the implication is, the underlying implication of relativity is that time and space are part of the same fabric, and that is why time dilation exists. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind that this is a real thing, that time and space are part of the same fabric. That in our ordinary perception, we don't really treat it that way. Time and space seem very distinctly different things. Although we know in more, we don't move close to the speeds of light, so we don't notice this effect. Okay, so this is going to be important. Let's talk about time dilation with respect to psychedelic experiences. Now, I think time dilation is one of the most, I think it's a primary component of the classic psychedelic experience, specifically if we're talking about LSD and mushrooms. So this is the slowing down of time. Now, I will say there are some reports of time contraction. But my theory on this is that time contraction is not really occurring on a moment-to-moment basis. Time dilation is what's occurring. Time is stretching out. Each moment, there's a sense of it feeling longer. Time feels stretched out. I think this is the effect that's actually happening. And time contraction only happens retroactively through memory. So, for instance, you could be laying down in the same spot for hours on end, not doing very much, and then you look back and you think, oh, I can't believe it's been so many hours. But I really think that this is something that's happening retroactively, and that on a moment-by-moment basis, time dilation is the effect during the psychedelic experience. And for those of you who haven't experienced significant time dilation, it's quite strange to have such a difference from your ordinary perception of time. And I mean, even everybody's familiar with some sense of the relativity of time and our perception of it. I mean, because time flies when you're having fun, or it drags on when you're somewhere you don't want to be. But the time dilation that occurs during the psychedelic experience is of a completely different nature. It's almost hard to believe if it wasn't happening. Now, I want to get into some other effects that, go beyond just time dilation. But here's what I want to get at. I think the time dilation experienced in the psychedelic experience is going to lead us to the implication that consciousness is part of the same fabric as time, as space-time, as consciousness and time and space. This is all part of the same underlying fabric. Okay? And I think it's possible that if we actually studied the effect of time dilation under psychedelic conditions, under non-ordinary states of consciousness, exotic states of consciousness, and there's a parallel here back to when we're talking about relativity, when we're talking about what happens to time close to the speed of light, or in the case of general relativity, it deals with gravity and there being a strong gravitational pull. Again, I liked special relativity is pretty easy. I'm not going to claim to understand general relativity. Hello. Okay. So yeah, so I think the underlying implication is that consciousness, there's a sort of, that time and space is actually the same fabric as the fabric of consciousness. Like, this is all part of the same fabric. Like, all of this is very connected. Okay? So let's talk about some other things that could happen during psychedelic experiences. So the natural conclusion of time dilation is, well, time stopping, which can be experienced. You can experience the feeling of being in a sort of eternal present where time ceases to exist. You can transcend time entirely. And there's quite a few different like flavors of experiencing this sort of effect. So like I said, there's like the transcendence of time, just like feeling like you've like stepped outside of time. And I get this a lot, sometimes actually, specifically with mushrooms. I don't know why. LSD, I kind of feel like I transcend time entirely, but with mushrooms, I get this, like I've stepped outside of it. And I can almost, like I almost see time as space. That's another thing. Okay, so think about the tracer effect, which is best illustrated by moving your hand across your face. And you can even see a tracer effect, you know, to some extent, if you move something fast enough. You can even see it in your ordinary perception. But during psychedelic perception, it's much more pronounced. And so what are we actually seeing here? We're seeing time in our spatial field. Time becomes space. I'm telling you, time and space are actually, I mean, they're part of the same fabric. We know this. We know that this is true. I think consciousness, time, and space are part of the same fabric. I want to keep going back to that. But sometimes I get this sense that I'm seeing time, that time is spatial in the sense that, you know, space is all here all at once. Time is that same nature. Time is all here all at once. What I really think about the distinction between time and space is that it's all about dimensions. And once you start getting into higher order dimensions, there's a certain threshold in which a dimension, the nature of a dimension, becomes of a different nature. There's a threshold in the ordering of dimensions. So we have space, and time we perceive as very different than space. But I think fundamentally it has the same nature of space. It's a dimension, and it has the same component in that it exists all at once. I think the true nature of time is that it's all here, okay? And this is a common, like, sort of epiphany that's happens with psychedelics. There's a sense of here-nowness, or it's all happening, or, yeah, that's one I get a lot. It's all happening. The very specific feeling that everything simultaneously causes everything else, that, you know, everything everywhere all at once. Why not? Where were we? Dimensions, okay? So I think that there's a certain threshold that happens with dimensions as we go up in orders, higher order dimensions of higher dimensions, in which the nature of the dimension becomes so different from the other dimensions that it's sort of perceived as an entirely different thing. So I think this is what happens with time, really, and why it's perceived and experienced is so different than space. Now, I don't know, you know, what's behind this threshold, but, you know, I also suspect that it can go beyond this. I think I can imagine one more dimension of time that behaves in a similar way. So if we go up, if we consider, now there's a lot of ways to think about dimensions, but if we just consider time as like the fourth dimension, we could consider the fifth dimension of time, you know, still a time-like dimension, in which the fifth dimension just includes multiple timelines, all different timelines. But what would be the sixth order? beyond that. I think at that point, I don't know, maybe it goes in threes. Maybe we can still imagine a six, but I think there's another higher order in which the dimension shifts nature once again, and it becomes something different than time. I mean, and this is all theoretical. This is all so far out there that, you know, I don't even think that I can conceive of it. I think that there's dimensions higher that we can't even conceive of. Like, we can conceive of space, or, you know, we experience space, we experience time, but I think the way that we perceive time is just that. It's just how we perceive it. It's not necessarily indicative of its true nature. So the way we perceive time is an illusion, okay? Let's talk about that phrase, because this is often something that comes up in psychedelic experiences, that time is an illusion, or at least our perception of time is an illusion. And what does it mean for something to be an illusion? It doesn't mean that the way we experience time is not how we experience it, because it is. It doesn't mean that this isn't real to some extent. The illusion just means you're not getting the whole story. It means it's appearing as one thing, but there's really more going on behind the scenes. That is the nature of an illusion, and I do think time is an illusion in that sense. That we don't perceive its true nature. And going back to relativity, I want to go back to this. We know time is actually much different than our common sense perception of it. We know this. Time and space are actually part of the same fabric, and time can in a very real way, slow down. Like, on a physical, measurable level, it can slow down. Like, I see, the thing is, we don't act as, it's hard to bring that back into your ordinary perception and really, because right now I'm in my ordinary perception, and I'm perceiving time as it is. And some of these things just really, they really stretch at the mind, and your mind wants to pull you back into this perception. I think our perception is the way it is. I mean, maybe it's a survival thing. I'm getting a little... Anyway, so... I want to talk about a few more things. I do think time, the way we perceive time, is an illusion, and that time is kind of here all at once. And I even feel like our minds are actually higher dimensional, and that our mind has to organize it this way. And if we go even beyond that, if we think of the universal mind, the underlying field of consciousness, it's a sort of way to order the information. Okay? Space is a way to organize the information. Time is another way to organize this information. And you can keep going up to higher orders. I think that there are much higher dimensions that we can't even conceive of. Anyway, yeah. So I kind of want to talk about just a few other, we're just, you know what? I'm getting a bit distracted by something. My cat is actually at the door, and you know what? That's fine. I was thinking I might do this in multiple parts, so I think I got a good amount out there. And yeah, I want to know your thoughts on time, especially like time with respect to the psychedelic experience. How have you experienced it? Let me know if there's anything I didn't talk about. I want to revisit this topic and, dive even more into a psychedelic analysis of time. But for now, I'm going to leave it at that, and you'll see me next time.